Thanks, everyone. So how's the first day of RailsConf treating you?
It's been awesome. I mean, as always, it is a pleasure to spend time with people who are passionate about programming, passionate about computers, and passionate about Ruby on Rails.
Yeah, I think it's been just a great day. I do have a bunch of questions that are, we're going to kind of break it up into 3 sections. We've got the past, the present, and the future, so sort of on theme. I'm going to start by asking, Rails is a framework that is primarily extraction from existing code that's in production. Has there ever been anything that you've wanted to extract, but it just hasn't felt like you could, or it wasn't the right time, and like what was?
Yeah, I think there has also been examples of things I have extracted that I shouldn't have. And
That's
I think
the next
we
question.
talked about some of these things. Robbie touched on active resource, which I thought was a great example of a framework that was prematurely extracted from having basically one use. I had one integration case where we were using it at 37 signals, and I thought, like, wow, we've solved it. And it was a great lesson in realizing that great extractions don't happen on the first reuse. It happens on the second. Because if you just have one case of something, it might very well just be a one-off. It might very well just be one particular solution to one particular problem, not something you can make generic. So I've tried to learn my lesson, and I tried to temper how eagerly I extract things. I try to reach the second use. At least I find that that's when the most successful extractions do happen. But the applications I work on are still full of unextracted Ruby code that could be turned into frameworks or could be turned into libraries. And I have this wish list of things I want to pick out. There's just an endless amount of work.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because I think when I released Rails 1.0, I thought, do you know what? Maybe in 6 months we're done. Like, the framework is going to be complete. We will have solved all the problems there is to solve with building web applications, and then we can just lean back and use the framework. That turned out not to be true. I'm glad, because I've had 22 years of fun continuing to build this framework, continuing to extract new things, continuing to keep up with the web. I think that's the other part that I really took a while to realize, that the web wasn't done. In 2005, we were not finished creating and improving the world's greatest application platform, the web. And this is one of the things that's really inspired me over the last, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years even, is that the improvement on the fundamentals of the web has sped up, not slowed down. We're making the web faster, or the improvement of the web, the technologies and the tools we're using with CSS, with JavaScript, what's built into the browser is getting better, faster than perhaps it's ever gotten. And it's taken some of the extractions that, not that I made, that others made, for example, with Sass for CSS pre-compilation. The fact that it took 12 years, I think, for CSS to adopt nesting, probably the primary feature of why people would use a CSS preprocessor, sort of seems ridiculous. But then now you look at what has happened with CSS just in the last 2 years, and for me, I just get super excited. I'm like, we can do so much in the browser. No pre-processing, just the straight text files, the no-build style that I've become such a big fan of.
Yeah, the just progress of CSS, like I think some of the things that are just happening there, like the browsers are so good now that you kind of don't need all of this extra complexity. Like between, I think nesting and variables are kind of the easy ones, but even like CSS layers, even like there's tons of stuff happening there that's like super, super exciting.
And the same happened on the JavaScript side, which I probably touch more than I touch CSS. We have some wonderful designers at 37 Signals, so I don't write that much CSS myself, but I do write a fair amount of JavaScript. And the fact that the browser was able to get us all the way to import maps, was able to get us modern include systems, was able to get us a syntax that's actually legitimately enjoyable to use, was a bit of a shock to me. Like, it kind of crept up on me. I'm like, hey, I kind of like writing this JavaScript now, in a way I would never have said 10 years ago. Like, I was not necessarily the biggest fan of vanilla JavaScript in the ES3 age, right? Like, this was why we got CoffeeScript, because that was a nicer dialect that felt more Ruby-like. And now JavaScript itself has gotten up to a level that's just really good. So keeping up with how the web platform evolves, now we're getting things like passkeys and other things that continue to push that boundary, is actually, it feels like there's more work than ever. It feels like there's more extractions than ever. There are more aspects of creating compelling applications that are not just competing against other web apps. That's the thing that I really came to realize, that the fight with the web is not so much with the web itself, but with the proprietary platforms like the mobile ecosystems. That the web has to stay current in order to be a reasonable alternative to a native iOS app. And I like my phone most of the time, but I don't enjoy being kind of, put it to a point here, imprisoned by a proprietary platform that tells me whether I get to publish an app or not. That to me is just an intolerable state that I sort of just have to deal with as part of building things for a modern audience who want to have native apps. But whenever the choice of going with the web, the free open web, that you don't have to ask for permission to publish a new application, you don't have to ask for permission to go into business, I go like, yes, this is why we need to be more forward-looking, more aggressive about evolving the web platforms, not stuck in the past, because our competition is not just other websites, it's the native platforms, it's the proprietary platforms.
Yeah, so going back a little bit to, going back to the web getting better and being able to rip out, being able to get rid of some of this complexity on the front end and get rid of this JavaScript complexity, there is a thing around kind of feeling like, oh, JavaScript is not as bad as it used to be, but is there a part of that feels inevitable looking back on it?
No, that's the big surprise to me.
Yeah.
I remember when we added Webpack to Rails 5, I knew that this was the kind of extraction that I hoped wouldn't last forever. I knew that going in. I knew, you know what, this is a temporary bridge for us to get to somewhere better. We got to do it right now. I don't love it. But if we don't, we're turning our back on where the innovation in the web is actually happening. All the advances in writing better, more modern JavaScript was happening in the pre-compilation stage. It's happening with the transpilers. And if we just hold our noses and say, we don't want to touch that, people are going to go somewhere else because they can't build the kind of apps they want to build with Rails. And then you can look at that and go, we can either be a purist and say, we don't want to touch any of this JavaScript stuff. We just want to stay over here, and they got to worry about that. And then realize that's the road to irrelevance. And I was not willing to make that trade. I'd much rather than just hold my nose and go like, you know what? Don't love this. Don't love the complexity. Don't love what it does to the onboarding experience of someone new to Rails. But also, people are adopting Rails. They're choosing to use it because they want to build something. And if we're telling them, here's this entire class of applications that you just can't build with Rails, that's not a healthy path. But I knew going in, that was probably the one extraction where even before it shipped, I went like, I can't wait until we can unship this.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, I think because the browser has just been getting so much better and because things have been getting so much better, there's a feeling, at least I have felt this way, that with all of the stuff around Hotwire, with Stimulus, it sort of feels like we are getting back to I'm going to say the good old days, but it feels like we're getting back to where being a full stack Rails dev is a real possibility.
Yes.
In a way that for a little while it felt like you kind of had to either
front end and back end.
Front end or back end, yeah.
Now what's interesting is I felt like the lone man on the island kind of keeping the flag up. The one developer, the integrated stack, the full stack developer. Like it almost became a joke for a hot minute because people refused to believe that you could do both because there was so much complexity on the front end that it felt like, well, you need a PhD just in build tools to figure that out. You can't do that and also be an expert in the back end. And I'm really glad we didn't give up on that because sometimes those kinds of values and those kinds of aspirations, you just go like, yes, it is a hard moment for that ideal. It's not that easy to be able to fulfill the full stack developer notion. The one developer framework is having a little bit of a hard time because there's so much complexity on the front side. But if you can just hold on, I trust the web is going to figure this out. I trust that we're going to get over this path of complexity, this bridge of complexity, and we're going to end up in a place where we can get back to that. And that has been the great joy for me over the last few years, is to realize, you know what, that's true. We have been able to get there. Not for everyone, not for all applications. There's still a bunch of shops that set it up, split up. They have the front ends, and then they have the back ends, and that's separate. But that's no longer a necessity to be competitive on the web. The way we build applications at 37 Signals, everyone is a full stack developer. We don't have anyone who just does JavaScript or just does backend. Everyone is assumed to be able to use the whole thing, which means that we can build features with one developer, one designer, which is a wonderful, productive pairing. And even if that doesn't work for everyone all the time, I think it is undoubtedly a better answer for anyone getting started. If you're just learning Rails now and you want to build something, you don't want to, what am I, a front-end developer? Am I a back-end developer? Where does all this go? No, I just want to build things. I want to get an application onto the web. What do I need to do? Tell me, because I don't know already. And we're able to offer a complete end-to-end solution for full-stack developers who can use Hotwire, who can use Turbo, half the time not even know what Turbo is. The Turbo is just this thing that makes a web application feel fast when you use Rails. I'm not even writing any JavaScript, and still it feels pretty good. Ultimately, though, Turbo falls in the same category a little bit like Webpack. I can't wait until we can unship Turbo. I can't wait until the browser has all the stuff that Turbo does to make applications feel amazing, just built in. All the preloading, all the things that we do make iframes great again. That would be amazing. Like, what if iframes weren't stuck in 2003 and we updated them for modern, lazy-loaded web components? That would be awesome. I think the browser can actually get there. And Turbo, to me, is, again, one of those crutches that we need right now, like we needed CoffeeScript for a period of years while JavaScript was kind of a little bit not the greatest. And then we can let go when the browsers get up to date.
Have you seen, a few years ago, there was some research at Google around an element called Portal, which is kind of a modern iframe kind of thing.
I haven't looked at this.
I think it's still behind a flag, and it's like not, like you can't turn it on really, but like someone in the browser build would have to turn it on. But it was like kind of along that same line. If you would preload in this like portal, and then you could transition the portal so you could get like page animations.
So this is what I really like about what's been happening, both at Google and to some extent Apple. Neither of those two companies are necessarily my favorite kinds of companies in the world, but the work that they've been doing on the browser absolutely is excellent. And the way that work has sped up, and the way that the people who are working on those browsers now actually seem to pay attention to how web developers build web applications. And they actually look at how things are built in the real world and go like, you know what, could we make this easier? And we had a long walk in the desert for about 10, 12 years where it seemed like browser builders had never looked at how web apps were actually built in the real world. There was no overlap between the web app development world and the browser development world. And then something magic happened. I still don't have the full thesis of how or who, but something happened, and now browsers actually seem interested in how we're building applications. So I do have some faith that these ways we're still ahead of the browser will catch up. And the more the browser can catch up, the more we can take out of Rails, the more complexity we can flatten, the more we can just send text files. And I think that is a throwback to the good old days. And you know what? Sometimes the good old days seem as just sort of nostalgia. This is for old people reminiscing about when they were young, right? Like, oh, the best music in the world just happened to be when I was 15, and it was just really whatever, right? Like, that's the time capsule. And there's something to that, but there's also some reality to it. Like, I've been spending a lot of time on the deployment problem. How do we get applications deployed to servers so the users can use it? I remember the good old times when I could FTP a Ruby script up to a CGI server, and the instant next reload would have the new code, and it took less than 1 second. And then I also remember a build pipeline we had at 37 Signals where I literally sat and stared with growing animosity and anger at a counter that showed 15 freaking minutes to deploy a 2-line change, and I thought, what have we done? Was I complicit in this? This is a great moral failure that we went from 1 second FTP deploys to 15-minute, wildly complicated CI, DI, blah, blah, blah deploys, where there's a million containers involved along the way. And what? To deploy the same 2-line change as I would have employed on FTP 20 years ago in a fraction of the time. Computers are literally 10,000 times faster. And I'm spending thousands of times more weight on a deploy. That seems completely preposterous. And I think That was the work I tried to pour into Kamal. How can we take some of the things that are better, right? Like, it's not like everything was just amazing when you were FTPing up a new file to CGI server, but there were some things there we should hold as a benchmark. We should not accept that level of regression, that changing a web application should take 15 minutes, because that's how long the build pipeline takes for all this nonsense to go through. Because how much better is it really? Would you rather feel like you have some certainty that there's a build pipeline that has run a bunch of tests, and then it takes 15 minutes to deploy, and then if you realize there was still a mistake, it takes 15 minutes to fix it? Or would you rather just FTP upload that one file, realize there's a bug, and fix it with VI straight on the damn server in about 2 seconds? What's actually better? Like, it's not actually apparent to me that we have improved things, even with modern tooling like Kamal and so forth. What's VI on the server actually better?
I mean, this terrifies me. The idea of like editing a thing on the server kind of terrifies me a little bit.
Oh, the bugs I fixed like that. I can tell stories for days. And not only the bugs I fixed like that, because where this really hits the 15-minute thing is when you actually have a real problem, right? You've caused part of the application to be down. You know what the answer is. Oh, it's a 2-line change. It's in one file I've identified. And now you go like, wait, you tell me I can do nothing? I now have to just wait 15 minutes for that to roll out? Give me VI back on the damn server. I'll SSH in myself and just change it.
Do you think that part of this problem is just all of the added complexity? Because like the reason we have a 15-minute build is because now we have all the stuff that we have to do before we can even ship it,
that we think we have to do.
That we think we have to do.
Right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And every single step of that build pipeline, there was someone who either once cut their fingers and went, never again, or someone went like, it would be much more pure if we just what? Build a pipeline that took 15 minutes? Like, it's the accumulative effect of tiny little changes over 10, 15 years where we just get boiled. And now I heard feedback when I shared the 15-minute deploys where people say, like, you should hear how long it takes at our company. Raise of hand, how many people does it take more than 10 minutes to deploy your application? Oh my fucking God. I mean, what? This is just unreasonable. I mean, this is also one of the things that actually gives me motivation, because I get, like, I can feel my heartbeat is going up a little bit because, like, I'm angry. I'm like, this is just, like, we did this to ourselves. Yeah. There weren't any aliens that came from fucking space and said, like, this shit, now this is how you do it. No, we went, like, I would like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then 10 years later, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No.
So, okay, so let's start there. We're at the 10-minute mark. What would have to happen to get us down to, say, a 30-second deploy?
So the goal that we've set at 37 signals, after I saw that 15-minute deploy one time, was the goal now is 2 minutes.
Okay.
So part of it is how do you build your images? I actually do think that Docker is good. I do think there's some complexity in it that's not necessarily the greatest, but the fundamental idea that you can encapsulate an entire system into a container, that's a final product, that's actually good. The problem is, how do we produce this? Problem one, we build in the cloud. Sometimes these cloud builders, their caches just get overwritten. They're doing clean builds all the time. Things cycle in and out. You get a noisy neighbor. All of a sudden, your cloud build takes forever. What we've done is we pulled it all home, back to developer machines, because now the fastest computers you can buy, which is actually amazing, the fastest computer you can buy is the one that sits on your desk. Like, we spend an enormous sum of money on very fancy AMD EPYC machines that live in the cloud, and many of them have like 64 cores, 96 cores. Those cores run at between 2.4 gigahertz and 2.7 gigahertz, because that's how you make that many cores fit on a single die, chip, whatever. The chip you have in your local computer, that might run at 4.7 gigahertz, it might run at 5.1 gigahertz. If you have a desktop computer, you might be running at 5.7 gigahertz. The difference between the 2.4 gigahertz and 2.7, like, that's almost double. Like, the fastest cores you can buy today are the ones that run in your personal computer. That's where we should be building. That's where we should be running CI. For a lot of systems, it is literally the fastest way to do it. We had a CI system that we're running in the cloud where our CI build alone was, first of all, subdivided in all these little sections, because that's the way you make it fast, right? Like, if anyone has looked at the Rails test suite and how that runs, it basically cuts it up into, I don't know, 40 different segments at this point to be able to run it fast. We pulled it all home. Now I can run the entire test suite for hey.com that we use is about 30,000 assertions in a minute and 12 seconds on the fastest machine I own. A minute, 12 seconds. The entire thing that needs to run this multi-million-dollar SaaS thing. How many people run their CI system in 1 minute? Oh, 4 people. The rest of you? It's taking too long. You should be able to run the whole goddamn thing in a minute. Again, if you're freaking Shopify and you have 4 million lines of code, no, that's not going to happen. But most people are not freaking Shopify, right? Most people are closer to 100,000 lines of code or 200,000 lines of code. At that scale, absolutely you should be able to run your CI in low single-digit minutes on local computers. So that's one thing we can do. We can make the CI part fast, 1 minute. Then you can build your images close to your code, and you can keep your caches warm. We've also moved the building of the images onto the local machines. Docker locally is actually really fast, especially if you're using an x86 computer. That was a Linux commercial, just going through over there. And you can do a bunch of these things, and you can get it down to about 2 minutes. But I think there's even more we could do. I have a bunch of ideas of 30 seconds, I think, is actually a very reasonable target. I remember when it first took 30 seconds with Capistrano back in 2007, I was like, this is so slow. Like, I was annoyed at 30 seconds back in 2007, and now we're like accepting 10-minute deploys in 2025. I think that's just such a clear illustration of how, as an industry, we're able to regress, sometimes for like good intentions, right? Like reproducibility, or containers in general, or cloud, or blah, blah, blah. And then we end up in a place where if you had told us in advance where we were, right? You were sitting there with your app going out in 30 seconds, and I was like, do you know what? What if you put it in a container? All you have to do is wait 15 minutes. You'd be like, yeah, no, I don't want that, right? We did not end up with that in one hop. We ended up 10 years of boiling frog.
But this is the story, like this is also the story of a lot of the complexity that we have now, is that
Yes.
is that, you know, we created one thing because it solved a tiny problem, and then you have to,
That's right.
but then it leads to another problem, and you have to create another thing to patch
That's right.
that problem, and then that leads to another problem, you have to patch that problem, so then you keep building up until you get to the 15-minute deployment.
This is why Rails is a full stack framework. This is why the entire picture is so much more important than any one individual part, right? Because you can really get boiled when you have teams and projects that are just focused on this part of it, and then everything else is not their problem. Well, in Rails, we say the whole fucking thing is our problem, right? The whole problem of building great web applications, deploying them to production, getting customers, that whole thing, our problem, right? From end to end. And then we can go like, then we own it. We can't just like, well, that's their problem, right? That's where things just, you get boiled and you feel like there's nothing you can do. With Rails, we've said from the beginning, no, that's not how we're not gonna roll like that. We're gonna solve the whole problem. And to solve the whole problem, we actually have to compress complexity. Because the only way the whole problem fits into our squishy little human brains is if we really smash it down into a little block. And then we go like, you know what? There are benefits to method A, but it comes with too much weight. I'm not gonna take it. I'm going to wait a second. I'm going to wait for method B that's maybe 95% as good, but 5% of the complexity. Oh, that fits into the box. And now the box fits into my goddamn brain, right? And like, we just have to accept our brains aren't that big, right? Like, we really need to take the big problems and make them into small problems, and then we can solve a handful of small problems. That's what fits, right? And anything that doesn't fit, that is any system that cannot be understood from end to end by a single developer, is a broken system when you start out. Again, I use Shopify because now I'm on the board, so I get to say we, because at Shopify, like, we don't get to do that, right? Like 4 million lines of code does not fit into any single human brain. But again, that's a 1% problem that you should be so lucky to have, right? By the time you get to $100 billion of market cap, you can have all the problems in the world, none of them matter. None of them fucking matter. You have all the money in the world to hire literally 9,000 people and 3,000 programmers to deal with them, right? It matters on day one. It matters, to use the Shopify example, when Toby is sitting at home building Snow Devil, the first app that turned into Shopify. That's when the compression of complexity really matters. The transition from 0 to 1. From there's nothing to there's something. And that's what Rails needs to keep its eye on. Even as we get all these great successes and we get all these unicorns and we get these fantastically valuable companies with thousands of programmers and developers in them, we got to think like, you know what? We need to make sure that the next Shopify can happen, that the next unicorn, or the next Basecamp, or like there's room all across the scale, right? Like it doesn't have to be just all about mega companies, but it does have to be about one programmer, a tiny team, no funding, spare time, freelance project that can turn into something. And the only way we ensure that that remains true is by continuing to be vigilant about a single programmer being able to understand the whole damn thing.
So, yeah. So there is an element here, I think, about like not just the solo developer experience, but there's also the omakase kind of, you have stuff in the box already, right?
Yes.
And that allows you to kind of ignore details that don't matter today,
yes.
right? And then maybe they matter in the future, but you can deal with them in the future.
Yes.
And I think that there's like that kind of piece of it too.
It's a huge part of it. Omakase to me is about two things. First, I'll take the noble part, and then I'll take the less noble part. The noble part is that omakase reduces the barriers of entry, because any developer who comes into Rails tomorrow and doesn't know all the things don't have to know all the things, because they just work until they hit problems, and then you learn a little bit about that problem. They don't realize that we literally have, I don't know how many lines of code that we have, but we have a lot of lines of code. And we solve a lot of problems, including a lot of sort of gnarly security issues and other things that are just taken care of you. You don't even have to know what a CSFR token is, right? Like you're starting on your application, you're blissfully aware that we're making sure that your form isn't getting hijacked, that it's being submitted to the server. That might have been a lesson you had to find out because your whole damn app got hacked. Right? And we go like, no, we got you. Like you don't even have to know about it. Now, one day you might want to know about it because you want to do something special. That's a problem for another day. And the main benefit of the omakase thing is basically to take all these problems and delay them as late as possible. If we can take a problem that in an earlier stage you had to learn about and you had to get good at, figure out how to solve on day one, and we could push it to day 1,000, holy shit, major win. Major compression in complexity, right? The other part is that the reason I'm still here 22 years later is that omakase also means like I have really strong opinions about how things should be built, and they happen to be the defaults in Rails. And that's why I'm still interested, right? Like for me, a big part of it is an expression of I care about 10,000 different things. And like I care about like lighting it up, like, no, that's not right. There we go. Now it's right. Right? Like that level of sort of detail-orientedness. Then there's a bunch of things I also don't care about, and there's tons of other people in the community who care greatly about. And then we can take all these things. I take my 10,000 things that I care about, and then there's another 10 million things to care about that everyone else have contributed their opinion on because they have expertise and they have insight into it. And I just go like, yeah, that sounds great. You sound like a competent person. The code looks correct. Congratulations, you now own that part of the code, Aaron. And that's how we can sort of distribute this kind of stuff in a way that works, and we can get buy-in and all these other things. But I think there's a symbiosis, there's a harmony here where people starting out, they don't have to even know what to care about. There's no paradox of choice. And I think that's actually an obligation as full-stack framework developers, is to ensure that whatever choices someone would want to make, that's a day later problem. No choices on day one. Everything has a default, and the default is good. You don't have to change anything. You may want to someday down the line when you really care about it, or you hit an edge problem, or you're at the frontier, or you just develop a sensibility that's different from what I have, or what Aaron has, or whoever else has put their mark on the framework, but you don't have to do it up front. And I think that remains perhaps the most heretical part of the Rails framework. The part that has never, or not never, but increasingly less been copied. I thought in 2004 when I pushed out Rails, like, all right, set your clock, we got 18 months, everyone's gonna have full stack frameworks, everyone is gonna do omakase menus, and then we got a little bit of it, we got Django, and I was like, yep, it's coming, and then it just stopped. It seemingly, the entire industry lost interest in solving complete problems and started focusing on narrow little subsections and went like, oh, I have a new rendering framework. And How you fit that in with everything else, well, that's your fucking problem, right? Like that's what basically the JavaScript world is. That's your fucking problem. That sort of sums up the tagline of trying to piece everything together, piecemeal by piecemeal. That's your fucking problem.
I think you touched on something about wanting to make sure that you can delay as long as possible, like day 1,000 or whatever. I'm curious because you've said in the past that you thought that you would have these problems at 37 signals. The one that comes to mind is like database sharding. But then you would just keep getting bailed out because chips would be fast, storage would be, like you could always scale and you just kept getting bailed out.
Yes.
Maybe we can transition a little bit and talk about like near future stuff. Is there anything that you think of that you think like might be something that you're bailed out on next?
I mean, first of all, I love getting bailed out.
Yeah.
When you get to get other people to solve your problems for you, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. You should try to take as many of your problems and give them to someone else who would like to solve them for you. That is a wonderful strategy. For us, I think the database sharding one is amazing because I think we started thinking about sharding as a probable inevitability. What is that word? Inevitability is what I'm trying to say. In like 2008, 7 maybe, we were like, oh my God, if like we keep growing the database and then this is how big this thing, we're going to run out of what a single database can do. And it never happened. Like we ended up moving single tables up, but we never had to do the full classic sharding, different clients on different databases and so forth. And now, it's never going to happen. Literally never. I don't have any problems, any applications where I ever think that I actually have to do sharding because storage is getting faster at an insane rate. We went from NVMe drives have literally doubled their throughput performance every generation. Like 3 to 4 went from whatever 2 gigabytes a second to 5 gigabytes a second, and now we just jumped again to 10 gigabytes a second. Like 10 gigabytes a second, like I'm never going to get close to that. Like it's so far out of the kind of problems that I deal with. So I absolutely love that. In terms of sort of bailing out, I have this evergreen vision that I want to be able to run every single application we have for all the customers that we have on a single computer I can hold in my hand. And like that's where I want to get bailed out. I want to take the whole data center and everything, boil it down into one computer. And you know what? If the business I had was maybe a little smaller, I can squint and I can see the future. I can squint and I can see that could be possible. The power of a single mini PC server today is way larger than the data center installation we had in, let's say, 2008 when Basecamp was doing many millions in ARR, right? Like, I can actually squint and see the future. Like, do you know what? We're going to be able to do it. We're going to be able to take the entire data center and we're going to boil it down to one box. And I actually think that reality has already happened for probably like 96% of all web apps could run on a single goddamn computer. Then there's 5% that has more needs, and there are other reasons why you wouldn't want it on a single computer, and redundancy, and blah, blah, blah. But the compression of complexity that happens when you take a distributed system and you turn it into a not distributed system is probably the greatest single compression of complexity we have in computing. When you can translate distributed system, multiple interrelated stuff, network calls, into IPC calls, into method calls, that's like orders of magnitude of complexity that just disappears, right? Networks are fallible things. They break, they disconnect, they do all sorts of stuff, and error handling has to happen. That does not have to happen when you call a method on a Ruby object, right? If the process is running, that method call is going to go through. You're not going to be like, did it go through? What's the latency on my method call, right? None of that has to happen. So I think that kind of compression of complexity is the end game. How do we reduce every single system we have to one computer running it all?
I think one thing that's interesting about that is I know for a lot of the once products you're using SQLite, and you're doing that because you have to deploy, you have to let somebody else install it, and the easiest way to do that is SQLite.
I'd actually say slightly different. That is the outcome, like that's what we're trying to do. But the reason I do it is for the compression of complexity. What's better than like having a process that runs a database separately from your whole thing? It's not having that, it's having a fucking file. Like SQLite is a file, well, technically now it's 3 files, let's be honest. There's a wall, there's a bunch of stuff, right? But like in theory, there's just a couple of files, and then there's your app talking to those files. That's an enormously wonderful reduction of complexity. You take a whole system that you use to run and configure and be an expert in, right? How do you operate this MySQL thing or this Postgres thing? And like it just goes poof, doesn't exist anymore. Now there's just a file, right? We did the same thing. Rosa's wonderful work on SolidQ was exactly in that service. How would we take the fact that we used to run Redis, we need to run Redis, in order to do job handling? What if we could just delete Redis? Now there's a whole class of operational concerns and keeping things in sync that just goes away. You just have the database. And then you take the database and like you throw away the database. And you're left with files. And you're like, I like where this is going. I like where this is going. We're really just going like boop, 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 down the ladder of complexity. And we end up with a handful of files. And how can we do that? We can do that because computers are getting faster, because SQLite is a modern wonder of the world, like literally deployed to billions of devices and has been around since the early 2000s and is incredible. And some of it is that like we're just realizing things that have been true for a while, but we haven't internalized. I love those things. I love this, and I talked about it at the Rails World keynote, that Redis is a product of 2009. Redis is a product of I need to store things in RAM because spinning this piece of metal around until it hits this little drive head that can read a byte off it is really slow. It's really slow. You take that and replace it with essentially another type of RAM, NVMe, and suddenly all the solutions we were devising to deal with the spinning disk, they don't make sense anymore. Like, oh, I don't even need that. And then we can go like, all right, delete. And you know what? If there's one thing I love, it's fucking deleting lines of code. It's deleting lines in my infrastructure. It's deleting services I need to run. It's deleting just complexity. And go, do you know what? This is what the future's supposed to be. The future's not supposed to be, we went from 1-second changes and deployments to 15-minute monstrosities. The future's supposed to be, I needed to run 5 computers in the past. I needed to manage a MySQL database. I needed to have a Redis instance and figure that stuff out. And now I just have 1 computer writing to 3 files. Life is good.
I think one thing here, if we can get to things that run on a single chip, this is just sort of a bit of personal lore, I guess. I've been like recently trying to like exit the cloud personally, so like putting photos on like a network drive. But I'm curious if we can get to a point where you could build Rails apps that are just running on something in your house and are backed by SQLite, and then maybe those things can talk to each other. Like, that seems like an interesting world. I don't know if it's one we want to actually be in, but it seems like an interesting possibility or an interesting...
I think it's deeply interesting. And I think it's deeply appealing. And I think a lot of folks who did not give 2 hoots about things like data sovereignty and so forth, especially if they're from Europe, suddenly care a lot about digital sovereignty. Suddenly care a lot about who owns the data and who can turn off the power. Right? Like these are suddenly real concerns in a concrete way that it seemed like it was just nutty people talking about abstract goals like 5 minutes ago. I can tell you, I've testified for Danish Parliament, the Danish politicians care very much about where their applications that run the fucking country are and who gets to have the on-off switch, right? Like that is a critical concern that I think actually is going to motivate folks to look into new architectures. And that's really exciting because I think it was already all here. All we were lacking was the motivation. And I think that motivation is super interesting. I'd actually go so far as to say, like, this is the part of the puzzle, the pie, the deployment that I care most about, pushing these things further out. Obviously, we left the cloud 2 years ago with compute, and we've just left the cloud with file storage. We literally moved out of AWS S3 4 days ago, I think 5 days ago. We deleted the last bucket. That was like, whatever, 10 petabytes worth of data distributed all over AWS's different stuff, and now we host it on our own hardware. Granted, a little more than the computer. It doesn't quite fit into a single box yet. But that is there. And like, I can see the straight line from where we are now to that holy land. And it feels pretty exciting. And it feels like there's a mission here to accomplish the ethos of the original design of the internet. This is something I've talked about a lot about, that the DARPA design for the internet was, okay, New York is taken out or Langley is taken out by a nuclear bomb, how do we still operate an information system where Seattle is online, right? Like we don't have a single hub to control everything. And we took that beautiful, incredible design and we traded it for a bit of convenience and put everything into US East 1. What the fuck? And I mean, the funny thing here is it's not even a theoretical concern. US East 1 was literally just down, when was that? A month ago, and a third of the internet went dark. I think it was an interaction between US East 1 and some Cloudflare stuff. But whatever it was centralization, right? We kept on trucking, right? Yeah. We were out of that shit. Like, Basecamp was up. So was a lot of other things. But the fact that one provider can take down a third of the internet is an absolute perversion of DARPA's genius. And I think we got to get out of that. We got to get back to an idea where we have an actually distributed network, where single nodes can go offline, where entire countries can go offline, and it doesn't affect the rest of the world. And I think that's a mission very much worth dedicating my time to.
Awesome. I think resiliency and just kind of like, for me, it's been about just like, I want to have my own stuff on my own network. I want to shift gears though, because there is kind of a big elephant in the tech world right now. So I thought maybe we could spend a little bit of time talking about AI. I'm curious how you see AI fitting into Rails development, and for Rails developers and people here who might be using these tools. Like, how do you think we should be using them? How do you think we should be working on them?
I think AI is, beyond this mission I just talked about, probably the most exciting and interesting thing that's happening in technology right now. Mm. And I say that while half the time swearing at how goddamn stupid ChatGPT can be, right? Like how much it still hallucinates config options on Unix tools that don't exist, that it would like to exist. I actually appreciate it a little bit, because when it hallucinates a config variable, it's like, yeah, Tmux should do that. Why doesn't it take like a config like that? Can you also just patch the code and upload it and release it, and then I can install it? That'd be great. But right now, it doesn't do those things, right? So we exist in this magical moment in time where I think anyone who's actually used AI, at least a little bit, have at one point or another been, hot damn, that's impressive. You're a very different kind of human than me if you have not experienced a, how does it do that moment with AI? But then you're also perhaps not a very experienced programmer. If you're not experienced, how can it be so dumb, so stupid? And who are these people who are telling us that all programmers are going to be out of a job by the end of the year? Have they seen the code? Like, do they know what it produces? Do you know where it ends up if you just ask it, like, build the system for me, and you go like, oh, yikes. Like, that's just, these two things exist at the same time. Like this extreme optimism and excitement for real advantage, real productivity gains that are here right now. I would probably not have done a bunch of the Linux work that I've done recently if I hadn't had AI to speed it up. Because I would have gotten too frustrated trying to find some hyperland configuration object 4 layers deep in some esoteric forum on Tumblr, right? Like that's not a pleasant experience, and AI makes that way more pleasant to figure out. Like finding the clues on what's wrong with your system and how to set it up and so forth is really nice. And I'm imagining that that's basically, I mean, I haven't learned, actually I shouldn't even imagine that. I learned Bash recently because I've been building all this, Linux stuff, and you know what? I knew Bash because anyone has used Bash, but I didn't know Bash, right? Like I hadn't actually built a ton of Bash scripts. And now I had to build up a ton of Bash scripts, and I learned it with AI. I kept asking it, like, here's the Ruby I would have written. What does that look like in Bash? And then I went like, oh my God, take it away. But then I still internalized what just an if statement in Bash looks like, and why all these semicolons are in the weirdest places, and where the do comes after the semicolon, like why? But I learned it, and I learned it faster, I think, than I would have otherwise. But it doesn't solve full systems. And we don't know what it's going to solve, right? Is it actually going to come to this problem? Like they keep like, oh yeah, in like 6 months, that's what's left, right? Yeah, they also said that 12 months ago and 18 months ago and I think 24 months ago, right? There's a lot of things that are very hard to divorce from the fact that if you hype your AI startup to the hilt, you might raise $100 billion. Like, that's a pretty compelling reason to lie the fuck out of your teeth, right? You're like, if I just like am a little more optimistic. I get $100 billion. I mean, we're all weak in a moment here, right? Like, I can understand the incentives to be delusional to the point of almost being a fraud, while there's something real, right? Like, can these things be true at the same time? Of course they can be true at the same time. Do we know what it's going to look like in a year? No, we don't. Strap in, enjoy the ride, and be amazed that we're making freaking sand do this. Like, these silicon chips, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if you've used the thinking model, like the DeepSeek, where it shows you how it's thinking. Yeah. And I'm like, I keep wanting to like pull back the curtain, like, there's got to be a human back here somewhere. Like, this is eerily similar to how I would think about a problem, how I would break it down. And it's not at all clear, like, what is this? Is this just a fancy stochastic token guessing machine, or is this actually an insight into how human brains work? Am I token completing with you right now, right? Am I just going like, what's the next token in the line? I don't know, maybe. It's entirely possible that this is actually an explanation for human intelligence, and we just don't know it. And I love that uncertainty. Like, how often are you blessed with that moment where you don't know what it's going to be? Like, the internet for me, when that came out, and I got onto it like 95, felt a little like that. There were folks in 95 who went like, I think Paul Krugman from the New York Times famously said that in, I think, 96, in 18 months, this internet thing is going to be over. It's just a fancy fax machine, right? And you're like, that's actually kind of funny to say the internet is a fancy fax machine. There's a little bit of truth in that, but obviously it was also delusional, right? Like, the internet literally rewrote society. Is this that? Or is this like, I don't know, the QCAP? Or is one of these other things that have gone through time that like didn't end up mattering? What was it called, the Segway? Is that what's it called? The thing that was going to rewrite cities, right? Like, now you look at those early clips from 60 Minutes and you just laugh your ass off. That like, you thought that was going to, you look like an idiot. Is that a little helmet? No one's going to want to do that, right? But then the AI thing, like, do you know what? It could be the internet. It really could.
Yeah, I think one of the things we were talking about just before coming on stage is that like, we don't know where we're going, but I think that there's like a fear that it's just going to replace work.
Yes.
But I think, like, your view is not that that's what's going to happen. It's going to change things, or we don't know. Like, what?
My view is we don't know, and do you know what? It's actually almost pointless to guess. This could be like the Industrial Revolution, and we go from 97% of folks working in the fields to 2% of folks working in the fields to feed us all. That's possible. Does anyone have any nostalgia for going back with like a horse and a hatchet and plowing the ground by hand to just produce a lot of jobs? I don't think so. Any of you want to go back to the assembly line and like put things together? I don't think so, right? So sometimes, maybe to a future us, we're going to look back like, you were putting code together by hand like a little robot? Like, that's really cute. I sort of hope not, because I really like programming.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you know what? Even if programming stops being an economically viable activity, like, I'm going to be like the saddle maker. Like, I know we don't use these horses for transportation anymore, but like, I really like saddles, so I'm going to continue making them. But we don't freaking know. It could also be like the ATM. So when the ATM came out, the automatic telling machine, everyone's like, oh my God, this is the death of the bank teller. And what happened instead was the number of branches that each bank had absolutely exploded, and more people end up as bank tellers than before the ATM, right? Sometimes there's some law that basically says as you lower the cost of something, you get more usage of it. It's entirely possible, as individual programmers become more productive with AI, more people want more programs, because the price of those programs go down, and we actually increase the number of programmers who are working, right? Now, what is that job? Is the job prompt engineer? I don't know, maybe then I am going to stick to my saddles, or potato farming, or something else. I don't know if that's what I want to do. But it is entirely possible that we have more programmers, prompt engineers, whatever you want to call it, going forward. We just don't know. And isn't that amazing? Like, we've got all these smart people in the entire world trying to figure this question out, and no one has the fucking answer. Love it.
Yeah, I think there's an element of just kind of like the uncertainty of it that's, you know, you kind of have to lean into it.
Yes.
You just sort of have to eventually get there, you know? Like,
and also, be thankful you're alive at this moment. Like, that's thousands of people before you. There'll be thousands of people after you. This may be the singular moment. This may be the singularity. And, like, you were there. You were conscious at the moment where, like, Skynet booted up. Holy shit. You're going to be able to tell everyone about the campfire that, like, you were there before it all, like, you know. That's, what a gift.
I think that there is, I really would be sad if I never got to, like, if like 5 years from now I'm not writing Ruby anymore and I'm just like talking to a computer. I think I would be sad because I feel like we're giving the fun part of the job to the computer.
I do agree with that, but I also don't think it's true, right? Like, people still play the guitar, even though they're better people than you to play the guitar, right? Like, the songs that you're playing, the vast majority of them have already been recorded by better musicians than you, and yet you choose to play the guitar. Maybe we choose to still write a little Ruby, just as a little bit of sort of hobby entertainment for ourselves. Entirely possible, but again, we don't know, so we might as well just choose optimism, right? Because what the hell else are we going to do? Like, sit and just fear the future over in the corner? That's a miserable way to live.
Yeah. Okay, I have one final lightning round. So there's a thing that was sort of a meme on the internet for a little while where you do a blind ranking of things. So I have 5 features of Rails. You have to rank them 1 to 5, but you don't know what's coming next.
Okay.
And when you rank something, you can't
I've taken that spot?
Yeah, you've taken that spot, so you can't re-rank it.
Go.
Okay. Okay, so the first one, prototype.js.
Yeah, that's going to be a 5.
Okay. Okay, let's do sprockets.
I like sprockets. Let's give it a 3.
3, okay. How do you feel about dynamic finder methods?
Oh man, that's got to be a 2. I still love them, and they were murdered by someone who cared about performance or something. And I'm like, no. Can we just wait until computers bail us out? Aren't they getting faster all the time? I still miss dynamic finder. You know what? I tried to write a dynamic finder not too long ago, and I was like, holy shit, it doesn't work anymore. No! They took it away from me. We might bring it back. Computers are fast enough now.
Yeah,
should we
we're
bring
just
it
going to
back?
get bailed out.
What do you think? Let's bring dynamic finders back. It's happening. Rails 9, here we go.
Okay, how do you feel, where do you feel the asset pipeline, the original asset pipeline goes on the list?
Oh, I kind of feel like it's got to share a spot with sprockets, but if I can't do that, shit, now I can't re-rank. I didn't use 4, right?
You did not use 4.
Yeah, I like the original. I think we were actually real pioneers here, if I'm going to pat ourselves on the back. We did bundling before the JavaScript folks woke up to bundling, and we did it for many of the same reasons, just in advance. I think that was really cool. I think it is now, like, yeah, no, it's not great, but what kind of code you wrote 15 years ago is that great? So, just like, introspect a little, please.
Yeah.
Let's give it 4.
So,
Yeah.
Are you...
All right, so now it's number 1.
No,
it's got to be
number 1.
amazing. Better be amazing. Don't say active resource.
That's not what I had written down, but now that you mention it, maybe... no, the last one was going to be Rails plugins. The old Rails plugin architecture from like the Rails 2 days. So that's coming back in Rails 9 too then, right?
No. Yeah, that's the problem with this game, isn't it? You don't know what comes last.
Yeah.
I got roasted on that one. All right, it's fair play. Yeah, do you know what? It's, I mean, I love gems. But I don't actually love plugins in the original conception of it. I like library gems. I like other framework gems. I don't so much like the I'm going to change Rails in that way gems. And I have never actually successfully made sort of the sub-project gems thing work. I know other people have. We've done things where we've embedded like login systems and so on that had full HTML and so forth. And I've usually ended up regretting it and just went, you know what, you can take dry too far. And sometimes just fucking copy the file, right? Like especially if it's a kind of easily datable asset type like an HTML file where you may want to alter how something looks over time and then you realize it would have been a lot easier if this code lived here and not inside some plugin that might be difficult to update because there's either 5 other apps that I don't want to update the thing. Like that's actually a real example from Signal ID that we have, which is our login system we use across multiple apps. And that experience of like, you know what, we have some apps that we stopped working on 15 years ago. I still have to deal with that problem because I want to update the plugin we're using in that plus the latest version of Basecamp, and that kind of sucks. So I've personally been burned by that to the degree that like it burns that it's number 1. But so goes the game.
Okay, so why don't we do this? I'll give you 1 reorder.
Ooh.
You get to move 1, but you have to replace it with what you're...
with another one?
With what you're swapping it with.
Now dynamic finders have to be number 1.
Yeah,
it
okay,
really
so
is.
then they are
we just
coming back
committed
on...
to it. It's happening in Rails 9, so number 1. Yes.
Nice, awesome. Well, thank you so much, and this has been a really fun conversation. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, we'll get to see you at the happy hour here in just a couple minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is really great. Thank you.